pray for us tonight? I'll pray then. Father, we live in a world in which the understanding of what it means to be human is becoming more and more obscured and obliterated. Father, help us to better understand who you are, which would allow us to better understand who you are and who we are, created in your likeness and your image, so that we might better understand our relationship with you. Father, be with those that may be still trying to come. Be with those that may be listening online. May we live as your son Jesus lived, because he was the ultimate human being. May we be like him in pursuing truth, but be like him in love and grace and mercy as well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We're on page 48. This section probably will take 3 sessions getting together. I really don't want to rush through this, because this is a distinctive difference between the naturalistic or materialistic or Darwinistic worldview and the Christian worldview. So I want to make sure you really understand the differences between the two. And there's some quotes in here that are, if you get nothing out of this whole study, I think they're worth their weight in gold. And I'll be sure to point those out when we get to them. Only because I think it sets up a distinct difference between the naturalistic or materialistic or Darwinian worldview and the Christian worldview, and how Christians have been at fault for allowing the naturalists or the Darwinists to cheat. And the true Darwinians know they're cheating. Those that don't haven't sat in the closet long enough and thought about their worldview to realize that they are cheating. Darwin knew he was cheating, which I find absolutely fascinating. Anyway, here we are, page 48. If someone read the opening paragraph, please. Oh, by the way, made is make. If you want to change that in your book. That was one of those errors I missed on my 3rd time through.
In this study, we are going to make a very countercultural assumption, but an assumption which I believe common sense and rational thinking will serve to validate. These assumptions that I am promoting are directly from God's Word and are revealed as characteristics of human beings because they are created in the image and likeness of God.
Let somebody read that opening statement from God's Word, Genesis 1:26 through 28.
Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground."
In the biblical text, God reveals a very high view of man's nature. He is able to communicate, relate, understand, and co-reign with God over all creation. Mankind is told to not only name the animals, but to rule over them and take dominion over them. But though man was created alone, God saw that his being alone was not good. And so woman was created out of man, and the two were originally intended to live as one flesh within the context of God's good earth and in a perfect relationship with each other and their creator. Genesis 2:18 through 25. Someone read from there all the way down to the question, which would be 2 paragraphs.
Man was to use his God-given creativity and reasoning power to rule and take dominion of the universe and to bring it into more complete and full productivity, beauty, and security, all the while using his God-given knowledge and innate consciousness of who God is and what he is like to do all that he does in cooperation and congruency with God's will. Man was to be righteous, doing what is right, and good because God is righteous and good, and all that God had created was good. Finally, man was to multiply his godlikeness and image throughout the world, begetting little Adams and little Eves so their children could join in the effort to take dominion over the universe and rule it in accordance with God's design and will.
Thoughts? We are going to take every one of these concepts, there's about 40 here, and dissect them as we go through, but this is just an overall statement of where we're headed for the next probably at least 3 sessions, maybe 4 sessions. Going on, what difference do you see between the biblical vision of mankind's purpose and meaning of life and Darwin's or Freud's or Sartre's? Sartre, if you're from France.
Well, he's intentionally created.
Good! Intentionally created, not just happened by chance. Good.
In the image of God.
Good. In the image of God.
And he's honored above the rest of creation.
Ah! Man has a special place in creation, whereas in Darwin's and Sartre's and what are the other one I mentioned? Freud's, we're just part on the same level. We're just part of creation. We don't have any distinct or special purpose. Fred, you were wanting in?
Well, I was just going to make it more broad, is that biblically we have a purpose where in these others there is none.
Yeah, please understand that the existentialists, you have to find your meaning. You have to find your purpose. Whereas God says, this is your purpose, you have to define what I'm saying your purpose is. Big difference. All the existentialists, from Nietzsche all the way through to the present time, in fact, that's where our culture is now. You have to define yourself. God says, no, I've defined you. It's your job to understand what I've defined you as and then live that out. What's going on? Which worldview can we live with and why? We're going to skip that one. Someone read the next section. Bottom of 48, top 49.
In this section, we will look at what it means for mankind to be created in God's likeness and image. We will compare those attributes with the attributes that must follow human origin if it is purely by chance. We will then make a comparison between the two worldviews and ask ourselves which worldview more accurately represents life as we know it, and which worldview can we live with.
Please keep that in mind as we continue on through. On what does, we're skipping a quote there. On what does morality, righteousness, creativity, dominion, and community rely in order to be expressed? And by the way, the quote before talks about how we have rationality given to us by God. So that's kind of a hint to the answer to the question. What does it take in order to be able to have morality, righteousness, creativity, dominion, and community?
Metaphysical.
Okay, a metaphysical base, which is what the word I'm looking for is based on, is actually a subgroup of the metaphysical.
Is reason the word you look
Reason or rationality. Good. Why is reason necessary for morality? Duh.
The difference between right and wrong.
Yeah, it takes an evaluation of looking at circumstances in order to determine if it's right or wrong. Why is reason or rationality, let's skip one, necessary for creativity?
It's kind of looking at what you have and seeing how you can build on top of it.
Good! You're taking elements that you have and using rationality or reason to make it something that it's not. Which is a very, very cool power that we have been given. We'll talk about that in section 3 of this section, in section C of this section. Going on, somebody read the quote by James Orr there before rationality, letter A.
The feature in man's nature for which we find evolution inadequate to account are precisely those in which we found the natural image of God in man to consist: his rationality, his moral nature, his religious capacity. The need of creative action to account for man's spirit, stamped with its attributes of rational intelligence and moral freedom, is on these grounds, it seems to me, established.
Do you believe that true? Do you believe we have a rationality that allows us to participate in rationality, morality, and religious activities? Yes! In fact, if there's anything that is evident, in fact, John Calvin said that the heart is a worship factory, an idol factory. Another theologian in the 18th century said that we can't help but worship. If we don't worship God, what do we worship?
Our idol, whatever we make our idol.
What kind of things do we worship today if we don't worship God?
Money.
Ourselves. Money.
Success?
Success.
You're going to serve somebody.
Even Bob Dylan got it right.
Mother.
It may not be the devil, it may not be the Lord, but everybody's going to serve somebody. And that's true. Folks, it's really hard for a lot of you here living in Michigan to not worship U of M football. Yeah, but you're wearing green and your hair is white, so. We will worship something, and that capacity alone has to be explained. You cannot explain it with natural, empirical evidence. In other words, you can't explain it by naturalistic or materialistic or Darwinian categories. Those categories are not, they're inadequate for explaining religious activity. Thoughts? First of all, they're worse than inadequate. It doesn't even come up on their radar. They discount them as not really being real. There's some type of fictitious activity that's going on within our psyche. That's a bunch of hooey. For those of you who oppose to me online, who have set up a campaign to get me out of here, deal with it. I'll be gone by next week. Other thoughts? Going on, rationality. As we looked at earlier, as Dostoevsky points out, if there is no God, then everything is permissible. There is no moral standard. Man is free to do whatever he wants with no moral restraints. But with this dismissal of moral restraints comes a meaningless and a loss of human dignity, as we are no longer the creation of a loving and rational God, but we are now the accident of time, chance, and nature. Not only are moral norms in human life with dignity made void when you dismiss God from man's origin, but also rationality cannot be reasonably assumed as well. For if man's origin is purely by chance, with no intelligent design behind his being, then how can humans be sure that their thinking and rationality are reliable? Why is that true?
Because there's no basis for anything. I mean,
That's true.
You're making them equal with every other substance in the universe, and so there's no hierarchy, and so you can't say that their point of view is any better than anything else's if they're all equal in creation.
No accountability.
Ooh. Whoa, that's a big. If I come across some beach stones that have an arrow, and then it says WC, which if you were paying attention to Pastor Dave last Sunday, you ought to know what that means.
Water closet.
Water closet.
Which in Europe means what?
Bathroom.
Good, bathroom. If I come across a beach and there's stones lined up with an arrow and pointing, and it says WC, and it's pointing to a WC, what can I assume?
That's a WC.
And? Was it put there by chance? No. Now, if I go a mile down the road, come across the exact same pattern with a WC, but there's no WC up there, it could have happened by chance. Eh?
Fell off and
Pardon me?
could have blown away.
Well, I mean, it'd be really, really rare to be able to find an arrow in a WC with washed up. But it could have happened. But when it happens and it points to a reality, that's beyond chance. What about our thinking? Does it point to reality? Oh boy, this is a loaded question. Or does it not?
Point to reality.
It depends on what your reality is.
No, I'm talking about reality. Lacey's sitting right there. Do you all agree?
Yes.
How can you agree to that?
It depends on if Lacey believes it.
But, would you all agree that Lacey exists? Why?
We can see her, we can hear her.
We can hear.
Good! The empirical evidence that we're demanding in order to define reality is overwhelmingly in support of the fact that Lacey exists. And the fact that she's smiling and nodding her head at an appropriate time in this conversation assures me that she's hearing and does in fact exist. Now, if she was somewhere else and half of you couldn't see her, then we might debate whether or not Lacey exists. Please understand that our empirical thinking and our rationality does point to reality. which makes it far, far, far more easy to assume it had to be designed by somebody intelligent rather than just happening by chance. I don't know if that's a big step for you to make or not, but it's hugely important. Going on. Go ahead and read this quote by a Hillsdale College former professor.
Without metaphysics, rationality is bankrupt, indeed impossible. It is those bedrock principles which supply the basis for rational critique. Without them, we are left to an insipid pragmatism, which, of course, is a position which has, in the final analysis, given up rationality and cannot, therefore, cast accusations on irrationality at Christianity.
What's he saying?
I'm not sure what he's saying, but he kind of writes like the Apostle Paul, these long, long complicated sentences.
He's a Hillsdale College professor, remember. Did you know Professor Burke at all?
Yeah, I had.
Did he really? Oh, good. Is he still there?
I think he might be.
Okay.
He was still teaching last year.
Okay. So Lacey, what is he saying?
So I am going through it again. Let's see. The biggest thing I feel like he's taking away is that if we give up metaphysics, then we can't critique Christianity.
That's exactly what he's saying. If we give up on metaphysics, we have no basis by which to say that we have rationality or reason or any of those things.
Right.
Which makes a person that argues against God makes their discussion totally irrational. Because they have no basis for making an argument against God. They have no basis for making an argument against anything. Because only God can give rationality and reason. It can't come, we'll talk about that later. Next question. If there is no intelligent design to man's brain, if humans came about purely by chance, then why is it unreasonable to believe that our thinking is rational or reliable? That's a question for you to think about. First of all, I believe that our rationality and reason is innate. A1. Someone read that paragraph that starts, it's bottom of 49.
In like fashion, the potentiality of a philosophy cannot exceed its presupposition.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're on it.
You're on.
She has an old version.
Yeah, you've got the,
Sorry.
she has a version I went through that was my pilot group.
All right. If in fact humans do possess rationality, it must be endowed to humans from some outside intelligent source. For philosophy of nature forbids having an effect greater than its cause. Nature does not allow for some effect to supersede the potentiality of that which is contained in it.
What's that paragraph saying?
It means there's no way that we could have been created by chance, but also have rationality.
Good, why?
Because
What's the principle that would be violated?
I don't
It
know.
would be a greater
It would be
outcome
greater
than just a
than-
random nothing.
Yeah, you can't have an outcome that's greater than the elements that are involved in it.
Right.
The created thing is better or bigger than the one that created it.
Oh, that's one way of looking at it as well. Yes, Ted.
You can't have a fire bigger than the amount of combustibles that you have.
Whoa! What about a nuclear explosion? Little 3 pounds of uranium, take out an entire 10,000, yeah.
We don't comprehend the power that's holding us together.
We have no idea what it takes to hold that 3 pounds of uranium together until you loosen the bonds that are holding it together. And that's why Nagasaki and Hiroshima ended up the way they did, is that scientists found a way to take the glue that was holding together and make it come apart. And it's even more with hydrogen. We are clueless to the power that is holding all of us together. I will never forget. I can tell you where I was seated, where I was in the house at the parsonage at Huntington. And I came home from Sunday night service, turned on Nova. And it was the end of the program, and the Nova guy, they were talking about nuclear glue. And the guy was talking about how they've done atom smashing and the big cyclotrons and everything else, trying to smash atoms and destroy them, and then look at the parts that come apart to know what makes up the nuclear glue, trying to find the element that holds everything together, the answer of the universe. This is the last words he said before the program ended. We have no idea how it happens, but it must be spiritual. I said, that's exactly what Colossians and Ephesians says. That Jesus is holding the universe together. And we have no clue of how much power it takes for Jesus to do that until you take it and pull it apart. Thoughts? Questions? Yes, Jan.
Has anybody else in here seen After Death?
Yes. Gene and I saw it Monday.
Okay. And that's the people that have died and have seen the light. So many of them were saying how there is just no human ability to express what you feel when you're with God.
Yeah.
And that's where they're, and to see it over and over again from multiple people in multiple situations, it just really, I think it's the closest way or closest that I've seen, and I think any human can see to a little bit more of what is so undescribable about heaven.
Yeah, and watching that, by the way, thanks to your grandson, Gene and I went because he had seen it on Saturday, and told us it was at Hillsdale Theater. I'm not sure if it's
tickets
still
to go Tuesday.
Next time?
Doris and I are going Tuesday.
Oh, so it's still there.
Oh, so it is still there, good.
It's still there.
Still there?
That's great.
Still there.
After watching that movie, it re-energized me for this whole study. Because I kept thinking, God has so much more planned for us than we can ever dream or imagine. And we are clueless to how much God has invested in us, in creating us in His likeness and image. And we won't know that until 10 seconds after, 2 seconds after, 1 second after we're dead.
The moment.
And then, all of a sudden, I think 1 John 3:2 will wash upon us. It says, we don't know what we will become, but when we see Him, we will become like Him, is what 1 John 3:2 says. I think we haven't got a clue of what we've got, of what we are. We are all Michael Jordans playing sandlot ball with a bunch of 3-foot pygmies. And we don't think we're any good. You wanted to say something, didn't? Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to point you out. Other thoughts? Going on, page 50. Read that quote, please.
In like fashion, the potentiality of a philosophy cannot exceed its presupposition. What a philosophy assumes to begin with ultimately determines all that it can be or can know. Greek philosophy assumed, or had as its given, the physical world and its structure as ultimate. As a result, it could not account for those things which were not included in its given or presupposition. But a philosophy which begins with matter, structure, or change as its ultimate and starting point can never result in a delineation of the ways of the self-contained creator of nature. Christian thought has consistently gone astray throughout most of its history by seeking to answer the world in terms of the world's own category.
That's so true. What's this paragraph saying?
What we were saying, we can't, humans can't grasp it and can't express it.
Okay.
We completely limit ourselves by using our own thoughts to imagine what we can be.
Yes. If we think we evolved by chance, if we think we're nothing but evolutionary product of change and time and random thoughts and random actions, then folks, we're not going to be tuned in to what we really were created to be. what we're really created to be like. And unfortunately, we keep thinking in the world's categories and the world's way of thinking, and we keep lowering the standard by which we exist because we bought into the world's thinking of what we are and who we are. We are so much more than that. And a philosophical system can only be as great as the elements that are its presuppositions. That's the elements that go into that philosophical thought. And if the elements going into it are chance and time, that's all you're going to get is chance and time. That can't exceed that. Thoughts. But if you're going into it as you're created in the image and likeness of God, holy cow. There's nothing we can't become if we're in tune with the God of the universe and become all He wants us to become. Ted, you wanted something in. I keep saying something over here. I'm sorry.
It just makes me think how we think in terms of the lowest common denominator. That
Oh, wow.
when we look around at other people and we try to be like other people, then we're limiting ourselves to this world. But
Oh,
like
Ted.
you said, if we imagine ourselves in the image of God and we use that as the basis of our imagination or our ability or our strength, or then our limits are greater than anything in the world.
Aren't you glad that our educational system has never bowed down to the lowest common denominator? And
Oh my gosh.
I'm not going to get a reaction out of this corner? Folks, it's a big problem. Fred and Lacey are unable to teach what they want to teach and be able to communicate what they'd like to be able to communicate for those students that really want to learn, because so many times they have to work and work and work and work and try to get the student who doesn't give a rip in order to have a passing grade in order for the school system to continue on. Is that a good summary of thoughts?
Same thing happens in the church.
Ooh, that's amazing.
She's right.
I'm gonna say preach it.
It does happen in the church. How does it happen in the church?
I think you become, in some cases, the church becomes influenced by outside people that want to have things a certain way, that you need to have it. It has to be this way in order for me to worship. It has to be this way in order for me to worship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
That we're good. Good.
We have lost the awe of God.
It's
You read a book on that. Other thoughts?
I'm curious, how do we consider people who might have understood there was something greater than them, but thought it was outside of them, like someone like Plato or the agnostics?
Well, Plato was right on a lot of things. He just looked in the wrong categories for the answers to what he knew to be true. That makes sense?
I think so.
Listen, the greatest class I ever, well, it wasn't the greatest. It was a really, really good class I took in seminary. It was a Christian philosopher by the name of Baron Nash. In fact, never mind, you don't need to know that. He really just made philosophy come alive for me, because he showed me how every philosopher, if they would have known a personal relationship with Jesus, would have found the answers to which they were searching for in their philosophical system. Nietzsche, Sartre, Russell, Plato, Aristotle. Well, Aristotle, never mind. All those guys, all these geniuses, were on the right track. They just didn't see Jesus. And because they couldn't see Jesus, couldn't find the answer for which they were looking.
Also, it's difficult for us to accept things that we can't even imagine.
Oh, well, why is that? I'd like us to introspect for just a little bit. Why is it hard for us to wrestle with things we can't imagine? Is that...
We're so geared to the empirical.
There's a big problem. We're so geared to the empirical, what we can taste, what we can touch, what we can smell, what we can see, what we can hear, that anything that's outside of that, we get suspect and worried about. What else?
Do you think it's because we don't have a proper like knowledge of and relation to God? Because if he's the creator of it, if we don't have the proper knowledge of and relation to him, then it's scary and it's intimidating and it's like we don't know that he is good. What he's created is good, and so it's just the unknown is scary. Does that make sense?
Good. No, it makes perfect sense. It's wonderful insight. Ted, you want it in?
I don't, we just, I think that that's the thing that is so astounding about children is that they don't have the fears to imagine things, and they don't have the
Limits.
they don't have the limits and the empirical mindset that we grow into, so they can see things and they can hear things that we can't see and hear.
And work with them.
And we lose it.
Yeah, and we lose it. Good.
We grow hard of hearing and hard of seeing and hard-hearted.
Why do you think Jesus said over and over, he who has ears to hear, let him hear? He's not talking about empirical ears. He's talking about a spiritual heart that can hear. A metaphysical awareness.
And children can sense and see and hear things that they can't explain.
Absolutely.
We think we have to be able to explain everything and understand everything. Our culture teaches us that.
Nita has to see this every day when she works with kids. Well, you don't work with kids anymore, do you? Do you?
Yes,
Stu?
she does.
You do?
Oh, I got kindergarten.
Watch, it's been my experience in children's ministry, you get 20 kids together, within minutes, they'll have a pecking order.
Oh, absolutely.
Within minutes! How do they do that? There'll be a leader, there'll be the one at the end of the parade. And they can be total strangers. And you can watch it happen before your adults. It takes them years to figure that out. And elections. Oh, we're coming up with that. We shouldn't say that.
But, also too, just going off of that, like, the imagination of kids. I mean, just today, there was a tissue that blew onto the floor. And so one kid said, oh, it's a ghost. And before you knew it, the other kids were seeing stuff. But that goes along with what you're seeing. Like, they kind of dreamt up this whole scenario of how the tissue got onto the floor. And they all kind of, I believe they believed each other. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because their imagination was not limited.
There's a Bible story that goes along with that. Anybody know which one?
Is it Samuel hearing God?
No, I'm thinking of Elisha and Gehazi and the soldiers.
Where Gehazi couldn't see the
Yeah.
angels that surrounding the enemy, but
Yeah, Elisha and Gehazi. It's Elisha, isn't it? It's got to be. Gehazi wasn't with Elijah. I'm pretty sure it's Elisha and Gehazi. They're surrounded by soldiers, and Elisha's chilling out. He's taking it easy, and Gehazi's going, "They're here for us. We're surrounded." And Elisha says, "Don't you see?" And Gehazi says, "See what? I see soldiers that are ready to capture us." And Elisha says, "But the army of angels that are there to disrupt this whole thing, and we're safe. Everything will be taken care of." And God allows Gehazi's eyes to be open and see the reality that's going on that before he was absolutely oblivious to. So how do we know what those kids saw or didn't see?
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, and that's truth. I mean, honestly, there's things that happen like that, obviously, all the time. But the thing is that they're just more receptive and more
Absolutely.
open to it.
Yeah.
And we are so limited that we, kind of like excuse it away.
Sure. Sure.
Children don't have any difficulty with the metaphysical.
Ah! That's exactly right.
Maybe that's why Jesus said, look, children.
I think it's one of the reasons, yeah.
The kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
We need to be little children.
This quote that I really want you to look at is looming. So, Jan, you're the last one before I go on.
You said at the beginning, when you were talking about Lacey, why do we think she's here?
Oh, right.
Because we can see her, because we can feel. And you just said, in that scripture example, the reality was that those angels were up there, but they couldn't see them. So us seeing things may not always be what reality is.
It may not be the full extent of reality. We can know a limited sense of reality, but we can't. Scientists tell us that our empirical senses are only giving us less than 5% of what is really there.
5%.
I have read that what your eyes see, it isn't what you see, your brain tells you what you're seeing.
Whoa, there's a good point too.
Not your eyes.
Yeah. Oh boy, this rabbit is really big. So I want to chase it for just a little bit. One of the things that I got access to was a military. How many of you in the military? You're in the military? Did you ever watch a movie on perspectives and how what she said was reality? I got a copy of that from a George at Addison Church. Oh, I can't think of his name. Anyway, he gave me a copy of it and showed how our minds will even change what we see if we're so programmed in a certain way to not. In other words, they flash up the 9 of spades, but the 9 of spades had red spades, and flashed it up really, really quick and said, "What do you see in that picture? A 9 of spades. Do you see anything wrong with it?" No. But then when he showed it and you could look at it, oh wow! But your mind would not allow it to be red because a 9 of spades is black. And so our programmed minds will dictate what we see and what we don't see. Which is huge when it comes to what the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 12, in that for us to really get maturity, we must have a renewing of our minds. In order to be able to see reality, in order to be able to see what's there, in order to be able to see what Gehazi was unable to see, God has to come in and overhaul our hearts and our minds before we'll ever see it. Going on, because I said Jan was the last one, but this was good. Darwin was haunted by the reality of his own theory. If he taught that man's thinking developed from the evolutionary forces of chance, then we have no reason to trust our thinking. Someone read that long paragraph that's done by John Lennox. It's actually 2 paragraphs.
Charles Darwin saw the problem. He wrote, "With me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy." Similarly, physicist John Polkinghorne says that the reduction of mental events to physics and chemistry destroys meaning. Thought is replaced by electrochemical neural events. Two such events cannot confront each other in rational discourse. They are neither right nor wrong, they simply happen. The world of rational discourse dissolves into the absurd chatter of firing synapses. Quite frankly, that cannot be right, and none of us believes it to be so. Polkinghorne is a Christian, but some well-known atheists also acknowledge the difficulty here. John Gray writes, "Modern humanism is the faith that through science humankind can know the truth and so be free. But if Darwin's theory of natural selection is true, this is impossible. The human mind serves evolutionary success, not truth." Another leading atheist philosopher, Thomas Nagel, thinks in the same way. In his book Mind and Cosmos, with the provocative subtitle, Why the Materialist Neo-Darwinian Conception of Nature is Almost Certainly False, he says, if the mental is not itself merely physical, it cannot be fully explained by physical science. Evolutionary naturalism implies that we should not take any of our convictions seriously, including the scientific world picture on which evolutionary naturalism depends. That is, naturalism and therefore atheism undermines the foundations of the very rationality that is needed to construct or understand or believe in any kind of argument whatsoever, let alone a scientific one. In short, it leads to the abolition of reason, a kind of abolition of man. Science is an essential part of what it means to be human.
What's he saying?
That those philosophies are oxymorons.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What else is he saying?
Since the end is not truth, we can't get truth from science.
We can't get truth from chemical reactions or electrochemical reactions. If, in fact, we are to reduce our thinking to electrical impulses and synapses, and those two confront each other, can they have rational discourse?
No.
No! There's no rational discourse about it. It's just pure science. The rational discourse, the thinking through of things, the morality of things, the metaphysical of things is above the science, is above the synapses, is above the electrochemical reactions. It's something that cannot be explained by pure science. And all this entire paragraph, this whole quote, is basically, I think, building a firm foundation upon which we can be assured that has to be the case. Thoughts?
Kind of blows their explanation of everything.
Hugely blows it out of the water.
I mean,
Absolutely.
all the assumptions they come to, if you can't trust, if you can't trust their assumptions, how can they trust their own assumptions?
That's another thing my philosophy teacher told me, is that when philosophers get on a wrong track, all you have to do is take what they promote, take it to the wall, and you'll find out where it breaks down. Sartre, Russell, Nietzsche, all those existentialists said, we can't have any meaning. If we've dismissed God, we can't have any meaning, we can't have any purpose. So R.C. Sproul said, well then shut up. You have nothing to say. You're telling me that your existence is meaningless and purposeless, and you have absolutely no basis by which to come to any conclusion that anything is rational at all. So what are you talking about? Why are you blabbing? Let somebody speak who believes that what they have to say makes a difference eternally, which is what Jesus taught us. He taught us that everything that comes out of our mouth, everything that we do, has eternal significance and importance. Not that life was meaningless. Thoughts? R.C. Sproul has a way, well, he did have, he's no longer alive, has a way of taking philosophical presuppositions and just shut up. You have nothing to say here. And if they would object, on the basis of what you've told me, I'm telling you to shut up. Thoughts? And folks, a lot of our world today and a lot of the philosophies that are prevalent today are those kind of philosophies that if you take what they're shoving down our throats and push it to the wall and take it to its extreme, can we live with the results that those philosophies are telling us how we should live? There's no way.
They don't even believe them.
Well, that's a big problem.
Only when they choose to. Like they just, what did they just pass recently? Some act or something that says that women can't be drafted into the military. Like just
Holy cow.
very recently. When was it? Just like
2 weeks ago.
This is federal?
Really?
yeah. It was maybe 3 weeks ago.
But we can't even
We don't
define
even know
what a
what women
woman
are
is.
anymore.
Wow.
Literally, I'm like your what is it? Like the passport stuff and like it's not. I mean, there's other options at this point. Like, how can they do that? Like, it's so convoluted. It's
Wow. Thanks for sharing.
squirrel.
Definitely just got to shut on YouTube.
Oh no, Pastor Keith already did. I'm way behind.
That ship has sailed.
I think, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking incorrectly here. I think it was you, Lacey, that made the comment about the paradigm, that the perspective of reality that your peers have doesn't allow them to go certain places. I guess I'm concluding, I mean, that was kind of a, gave me pause to think, because that explains a lot of things. Why we're not taking them to the wall. We don't have time. Our reality doesn't give us time to deal with sorting out what is true and what is not.
But we're not taught to think that way. Like, we're not taught to critically think and wrestle with those things and push them.
The problem is, especially on Nietzsche's own grounds, you can't argue with him because he pretty much says, you're just creating this, there's no grounds for this, and you can't say, oh, that's incorrect. He's like, how can you tell me? We have different grounds. That's just how it is.
And that is how it is.
Yeah, but like, even talking to students now, like, they kind of just say, I believe this, and they're like, well, how can you live with it? He's like, why not? And I'm like,
There's no rationale to what they're thinking or what they are believing. It's just because that's what the new thing is.
And it is the new thing.
Brainwashing.
We've come to a point where the predominant culture in the West, among people that are 35 and younger, is that I create my own reality and I respond to that out of what I think reality is. Even if I think I'm a cat, or I think I'm a dog, or I think I'm a whatever genders
And I
they
think
create.
that movie Expelled really pulled, I mean, you can see that all through that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it's there.
And folks, we have things that we can't accept because of our presuppositions as well. I mean, it drives me nuts to think that anybody would support Hamas at this point. But half the college campuses are filled with students who think that Hamas is being oppressed, and so Israel, the oppressor, has to be dealt with because Hamas, it doesn't matter what they do. The oppressed is always right. The oppressor is always wrong. That's their worldview. That's the new critical theory worldview that what defines right and wrong is whether you're oppressed or the oppressor. And folks, that's coming loud and clear through our college campuses now. And Doris and Jan and everybody else has said this. It's right. We don't think critically anymore. But it's not that God hasn't equipped us to. And He's made us in His likeness and His image, that if we'll get on board with His principles and His likeness and His image, we'll start to see clearly how these things are not sustainable. These worldviews that we currently embrace in cultural America, 35 and younger, there's no way 30 years from now they're still going to be prevalent. Just no way. If it is, we're gone. just you can't continue to live with the oppressor always wrong and the oppressed always right.
Well, and it's hard too because even as adults, it is constantly thrown at us. Whether it's your children facing it, or your grandchildren facing it, or whatever channel you put on the news. You know, this channel says this channel says that. You know, you're always constantly having to try to filter all of this information that's coming at you, and not be influenced by it.
And Anita says a very critical thing. You must learn to filter. You must. To openly embrace everything the world shoves at you is disastrous. It's what the scriptures preach against wholeheartedly. Going on. We talked about this. What nasty implications does a purely naturalistic view of him in thinking have to do with what it means to engage in discourse? In other words, if I'm a naturalist, if I'm a materialist, if I'm a Darwinian with integrity, what does it mean to engage in discourse?
What's the point? You're willing to listen to the other side.
You're just hearing sounds that don't matter.
Yes, it doesn't matter. All that's happening is my ears are hearing things, electromagnetic signals are being sent to my brain is responding, but it's all meaningless. Because it doesn't carry any context, it doesn't carry any content, it doesn't carry any meaning, it doesn't carry any purpose. How can it? Those are all metaphysical properties. This is a materialistic and a naturalistic worldview. And folks, don't allow the materialist, don't allow the naturalist, don't allow the Darwinian to steal metaphysical properties and bring them into their arguments. That's cheating. They've ruled them out of court. They've ruled the metaphysical out of court when they've dismissed of God. It could no longer be true. And yet they use them all the time. Don't let them. And that will get me kicked off. Thoughts?
How do the naturalists use math then? How do they rationalize?
Oh, Lacey, I'm glad that's coming from you. Why would give your rationale behind that statement?
I mean, the issue is that there's all these rules that will always hold that, like, at the end of the day, you can't show it physically. You can't show that this is always going to, this will always happen. But you can show that in a mathematical process that's outside of the physical reality. Like, it's such a weird concept that while it does hold in, like, if I drop a ball, like, it will always drop. But I can't represent what's happening, like, with its speed or, like, with its position. But I can always do that in mathematics when the ball isn't even being dropped.
And the mathematical process itself is a metaphysical
Reasoning.
What's the word? Activity.
Math doesn't seem metaphysical to me.
Oh.
Concept?
Oh.
How do they deal with like the teeth?
Where's Fred?
I mean, at the end of the day, like in my geometry class, my first 3 weeks is just on logic. Because mathematics really, like you start with principles that you assume is true and then everything builds up on those principles. Like it is just a whole, it's pretty much like logics, but you're using numbers and variables.
It's the rationality and the thinking and the use of mathematics and the creativity that it takes in order to use mathematics in a story problem that takes metaphysical properties in order to even engage in those kind of activities.
Okay.
Can you take it any further?
I guess the only way I can think is it's almost like, I like to think of God's blueprint of how reality works. Like it's the way that you can see like how all these numbers and how these relations can interact with each other and like kind of play out in reality. It's really hard to explain with all the different
Yeah, I'm not doing a good job either.
It's really hard to give it justice.
Ted.
It's like imagination and creativity and it's kind of like planning. The way you said that you start out and you build everything off of the truth, it's kind of like tomorrow's built off today in that metaphysical sense. I mean, we make plans for tomorrow because of our past. We assume tomorrow's going to be here, and yesterday was here, and yesterday we did this, so tomorrow we want to do this. And mathematics would sort of be in the metaphysical way, that's the way math works.
Sure.
You're like multiplying your days, and multiplying your time, and multiplying things that don't exist into existence.
Please understand, when a computer does your computations for you, it has no idea the meaning behind those computations.
Right.
It's the meaning of the math that gives it metaphysical property.
How does a naturalist deal with music?
Oh!
Like,
it gets worse than
they
that.
shouldn't be allowed to listen to music or enjoy music because that is stealing.
Or at least have opinions on music.
Yeah, or like enjoy a sunset or like anything because that's like that reaction.
You can play music in a purely empirical sense. In other words, you're playing the notes and you're responding to certain black dots on a page and playing a certain note according to that and be purely materialistic and naturalistic. But that's not music.
But the minute you react.
Oh, there you go.
Because there is music that is like, nails on a chalkboard. And then there's music that is like soothing and stimulates your mind. And like, so, whoa, you don't get to, you don't get to steal that.
A musician is not somebody who plays the notes.
That's right.
A musician is somebody who can get the response. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, and leadeth me beside still waters, and restoreth my soul. When I would walk through the shadow of death, I feel no. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. What's the difference between the two?
Feeling.
Right! What is feelings? Metaphysical.
But see, I would have to talk to Lacey some more about math, I guess. Because to me, math is the most empirical.
It is empirical.
The most empirical discipline that there is.
But the minute you use it and the minute you apply it, it takes on a metaphysical
I
property.
don't understand it empirically or scientifically. This is confused metaphysically.
I mean, are you
This is on
Are you saying, Lacey, correct me if I'm wrong here, but, you know, there are ways, like when it comes to math, that we can say, okay, I can put 2 pencils in front of me and 2 more pencils in front of me, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pencils, and you can see that and you can physically measure that in front of you, but if you take that and then you extrapolate it and you apply that principle then exponentially, right, on down the line, we can then predict that if we multiplied this so many times that we would have X amount of pencils. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Is that kind of the same?
Pretty much there's rules that you can apply to any situation that will always hold, but does not rely on the physical reality itself. So there's like laws of mathematics that I can prove will always remain true, but I don't need to show every single situation to prove it's true, because if I did that, I'd be spending the rest of my life just trying to prove one mathematical thing, and I would be so tired by the end of it.
Right, you could predict the drop of a ball mathematically without actually having to.
Right, and I wouldn't have to just assume like every single time it has to be
Right.
the exact case. I can get a mathematical theorem that will show me how it's going to relate.
Yeah.
Fred.
I think one of the issues with it, Larry, is that with just the basic math concepts, they're so ingrained and so obvious to us.
Yes. Yes.
Like, for example, if I have 3 apples in a bag and I add 3 apples to that bag, I'm always going to have more apples in the bag. That's addition. But, and so that is a universal principle, and that would we just obviously think that. It's completely nonsensical to think that if you take more apples and put them in the bag, now you're gonna have less apples. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's that principle that is just,
So you're saying those metaphysical thoughts are so normal for us that we just take advantage of them and we don't even realize we're engaging in the metaphysical.
if I was adding apples to a bag, and then when you looked in the bag, there was less apples, that would be nonsensical.
And the minute you're dealing with this, a rationality or irrationality, you're already involved in the metaphysical.
Okay.
And what Fred and Jody both are saying is hugely important. We so rely upon the metaphysical for our everyday thinking, we have no clue how much we're heavily dependent upon it. This class is oozing with the metaphysical. it would take a lifetime to explain just what took place in this 1-hour class. Ted?
That's the whole point of it being metaphysical.
Oh!
We didn't have any pencils here. Fred don't have any apples there. None of this is in existence. So it's all metaphysical.
That's exactly the truth. We're dealing with abstract concepts that are out there, but we all take it for granted. We didn't even recognize it till Ted pointed it out. That's huge. That's huge.
I'm really tired. Could I have word the apples?
Listen, I know this is a stretch for most of you because you've not been taught logic and philosophy. But folks, you are dealing with it on a daily basis, whether you want to recognize it or not. I'm just trying to help you navigate what God says about our rationality, what God says about our reason, and backing up the trolley all the way back to when you were created, to allow you to know what it means to transform your mind so that you do think God's thoughts after Him, and that you do use the mind that God has created you to use, rather than allowing the world to influence you so much that you are, all of us, are adopting principles from the world and we don't even know it. And a lot of it has to do with the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about how we relate to others. And folks, I think that's been death for what it means to be human. We've lowered the standard. We've allowed the lowest common denominator to be so prevalent in our culture that we're almost turning ourselves into animals. In fact, in some ways, the animals are superior to us. And God never asked for that. Never wanted that. I saw a hand earlier and then I lost it. Go ahead.
I don't know if it's just kind of adding on to what we just talked about, is the big advantage with the rational thinking with all this too, is that, because you talked about how calculators will only spit out what you put into them, and there's so many people taking math that, have something plus something and end up with less than what the numbers were, and if you have the thought process that you're supposed to have going into it, it should be greater than each of those individual numbers, and it's so basic, but at the same time it's so important.
And even in Jody's explanation, having the ability to recognize this can't be right, that's a metaphysical exercise. That's a metaphysical application of the math. Yes, Phyllis, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I didn't go to college until I was 47, and I took algebra classes in college, so you know how that can affect a person. And my youngest son and my oldest son were just great mathematicians. I mean, everything was perfect. I was trying to figure out a slope, and my youngest son was trying to help me, and he would say, "Mom, they're not trying to trick you." He would say things like that. And when I look at it, I don't know if it's the way my mind was trained. I would always question this and question that and look at the problem forever and say, well. But in the end, I finally had to realize it was true. It was going to be the right answer if I used the right formula.
Wow, good. Other thoughts? Carrying on. Someone read that quote at the bottom by David Bentley Hart. Oh, this is good.
Quite a few otherwise intelligent men and women take it as an established principle that we can know as true only what can be verified by empirical methods of experimentation and observation. This is, for one thing, a notoriously self-refuting claim, inasmuch as it cannot itself be demonstrated to be true by any application of empirical method.
What's he saying?
Basically what Lacey just said, right?
What did Lacey say?
Well, that she could, demonstrate for days the same thing, but...
Well, you can't prove something empirical without the metaphysical.
Ah! Yeah. So if you're using only... go ahead, Lacey.
Pretty much the whole idea, if I'm going to add two whole numbers together, I'm always going to get a more number. If we're going to use this rule, then I'd have to show in every single case that this is always going to hold true. Right. I'd be spending the rest of my life proving this one principle, which is so obvious to us.
Yeah.
Fred, you want it in.
Well, I think basically what you're saying is that when you say that the only reality is what we can empirically observe, is nothing you can prove. It's a metaphysical concept.
You violated your own principle in saying it.
Yeah.
And folks, that's what I want you to learn to recognize in the worldview, in how they're presenting things. They're doing it all the time, and we just sit back and accept it and don't realize you can't be serious in what you're promoting because you're conflicting yourself into the very statement you're making is contradictory.
Somebody said to me once, the only absolute is that there are no absolutes.
What's wrong with that statement?
They're saying that's an absolute.
It's just, right, it's just a contradiction of terms.
Nothing is ever always.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nothing is ever always.
we're going to carry on with that one. Second question down on page 51. What is nasty implication does a purely naturalistic view of human thinking do with what it means to love?
That's a metaphysical.
Yeah. Love is
What does the naturalist with integrity, and listen, there are people who actually believe this, so I'm not making this up. There are naturalists and materialists and Darwinians that have intellectual integrity. What do they say love is?
Yeah, it has to just be a chemical response.
Exactly. It's nothing more than a certain amount of hormones and neurons, synapses firing in a certain way to create this mood. That's all it is.
Well, isn't a mood metaphysical?
It depends if you have a naturalistic view or not, because a mood for them is part of the chemical response that you're experiencing because of certain set of circumstances were created.
That's ridiculous.
Well, what does that do to love? I mean, real love.
That love
Makes it
is-
empty.
Yeah.
Listen, it's meaningless.
Right.
Well, wouldn't it only be, if it was just a chemical reaction, wouldn't it only be like for a moment?
Well, it depends on how long you sustain the hormonal
So
impulse.
like, for those that are married for 50 years and can say that they still love each other, so that one chemical response lasted for 50 years every single day?
And that person's
It doesn't-
never always
Right.
lovable. You know what I mean? So
Right.
then
But you still love them anyway.
I'm just saying you're not always the most lovable person, nor am I, but I'm in love with you.
Can love
That's
be
my
reduced
point.
then to something that I need, like food, or to something?
They see that all as neurochemical responses. And to answer your question, I've not read anywhere what they would do with a 50-year-old couple that's been married and still claim they love each other, but that would be a problem.
Right.
Fred?
Well, I think, you've always talked about the three types of love. You have eros love and philos
That's
love
what I
and
was
agape
just
love.
about to say, yeah.
That form of love would be only eros love.
You're right.
There is no,
I'm glad
But
you
they
brought that
couldn't
up.
allow themselves.
Because how do you do a sacrificial love?
Yes. That's
Because it's not doing anything for yourself.
agape love and philos love. I would think that a naturalist and a materialist that has any integrity, academic and intellectual integrity at all, would have to rule that out of court.
Right.
Would say that no longer it can't exist because that's part of the metaphysical realm, and I don't believe I'm speaking as a naturalist and materialist. I don't believe the metaphysical realm exists, and so all I have is eros love.
Yeah, but isn't there believing?
I'm okay.
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
that was more of an empirical reality.
Gene, you're gonna love this. It's exactly
No
right.
idea what was said.
Exactly right.
What did she say?
And that's David Bentley Hart. I quote him quite a bit throughout here. I've quoted him once already tonight. He will absolutely not allow materialists and naturalists who claim to have intellectual integrity, allow them to do any of that, because he says that is outside of the realm of your reality. You're not allowed to go there.
Believing, Dora.
Okay, thank you.
Because it is a metaphysical property, metaphysical activity.
Keith, I think your problem is you have a three-legged chair.
I should bring my one from home, it's three-legged.
A lot of people could sit on a three-legged chair.
Not Keith.
Other thoughts? Otherwise, we're gonna wrap this up quickly.
We are just reduced to animals by there.
Listen, I don't know if you remember a couple sessions ago, I talked just briefly about how the Bible speaks about us. We can actually degenerate to the point of animals. Peter brings that up, Jude brings that up. There's a biblical case for that in Daniel chapter 6 where God allows a Nebuchadnezzar to be reduced to an animal. Why? What was Nebuchadnezzar's problem? Pride. God says, you're so proud, so full of yourself, you're not even thinking in the spiritual realm. You're so full of what you've accomplished materialistically, you're not even looking at the spiritual aspect of you at all. So you need a timeout for 7 years, and I'm going to allow you to be an animal so that you can understand what it really means to be human, what it really means to be a man, and that I've given you that. And you're nothing without me, Nebuchadnezzar. Even though you're king of Babylon, the most powerful nation in the world at that particular time, you're nothing unless I give it to you. And that's true of all of us. We are nothing without the metaphysical. We're nothing without the spiritual. You're nothing but an AI robot. And folks, I'm being convinced that AI robots is a lot of people's salvation. And it's going to be our demise.
Yeah.
Jan.
This whole thinking, and the more that our culture is brainwashed into believing it, just turns us, the idea of being turned more into animals, it just makes us so much easier to control.
Oh, wow. Boy, have you said a prophetic word. Because I think ultimately that's what it's all about. But a lot of you were saying I'm a conspiracy theorist. And you're going down that path, so I'm not going to beat that drum too awful loud, but it's worth considering.
Don't you think that's what our government does, those try to control us? Oh, don't say that.
Well, now we're definitely off.
Phyllis did it. I put it between the lines.
Move that camera over.
The naturalistic view of love, though, doesn't explain love that doesn't make sense. And that, like,
oh, absolutely.
A child's in a burning car, and the mom and dad run in there knowing they're going to burn up to get that child out, or any of those.
A grenade comes into a foxhole, and the guy sees it. His whole buddies are going to get killed, so he jumps on it and has himself blown to bits because he saves his buddies. How do you explain that with a materialistic or a naturalistic framework? No way. No way. That is way outside of any kind of category. And folks, it's what makes us human.
Yep.
That's the way we're supposed to live. Jesus was the ultimate human. What did he do? He jumped on the grenade. Yeah, Jan.
God created man for the purpose of choosing to follow him and worship him.
Absolutely.
If love is only this chemical thing and it has nothing to do with all of the other feelings, then that totally pulls away any human desire to want to worship God for the purpose that he made us.
It doesn't even matter than that. It eliminates choice itself. In fact, that's why Freud, that's why Skinner, that's why Sartre to some extent, all believe that we really don't have a choice. Our environment, our social conditioning programs us to respond in a certain way.
That's a whole other can of worms.
Oh, and we covered it briefly 3 sessions ago. Read the first 30 pages. Okay, we need to call tonight. We'll begin with A2. We got about 1/3 of the way where I wanted to get.
So this will be going for 3 years instead of 1.
Oh, it's true.
Not on YouTube, but here.
We've killed Facebook before page 50.
So you know, we'll get together on November 17th? No.
Yeah.
November 17th here. We will not meet on the first Friday of December. I have another obligation. I have a gig I need to play in Hudson that night. And so I agreed to this even before this started out. And so I need to fulfill that obligation. So we're actually going to go 4 weeks from November 17th until the third Friday in December. It's the 1st of December? Okay, so we'll meet the 15th of December then.
Who wants to do that, Chris?
We will meet next Thursday. We will meet 2 Thursdays from now. Fridays.
You're following with me.
Yeah, we know what you're saying.
The fact that we know what you're saying, even though you say that, is metaphysical.
Oh! No, it is!
It really is.
That's a great example of living above the evidence and the empirical. Wow, good for you. You're learning to think and going into the categories I'm hoping this will all learn to live by. Knowing God's Spirit that well, you knew my spirit well enough to Yeah, he's just being an idiot right now. Don't pay attention to him. He's trying to say November 17th, we will meet. December 1st, we will not meet.
December 1st.
We will not meet.
Not.
I will send you, if I have your email address, I will send you a memo. How many did not receive a memo this time? That alerting you to the class tonight? I will send you, well, no, that's a lie. Gene. Will send,
We also knew that.
you understood the spirit again.
You know what? The people that go to this church that are not here are going to have a hard time talking to anybody in here. They will not understand what we're saying.
Well,
Meta.
part of me counts that a great success.
Yeah.
Folks, I really, 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 really believe we're more conditioned in our thinking than we ever dreamed or imagined. And that this is an effort to fight through that and to get us to realize what we were created and intended to be, but we're falling. When Paul says we've fallen far short of the glory of God, we have no clue of the extent of that fallen shorts. I mean, not...
We better pray and go home.
Will you,
They're dropping now.
will you do that for us? Sharon's going to bail us all out and pray for us.
Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the many thoughts that are going through our heads now tonight from being challenged to think as you intended us to. Thank you for Pastor Keith and for leading this discussion and for giving us minds to think. May we consider that more and more as we go through this study. In Jesus' name. Give us traveling mercies on our way home. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and last,
Love your neighbor as yourself.
now well, there's your strength, love your neighbor as yourself. The first three are all metaphysical. See ya.